Firstly, apologies on these first two clips. The camera just stopped recording after a certain period of time, so I haven't got everything here. Now I'm turning 4 wet walnut blanks here. On the first two here I had to cut off the corners as they were going to be just too big to fit over the bedways. These pieces are really out of balance, and as you can see that the way my lathe is bouncing around. The lathe is not bolted to the floor, which by leaving it this way enables me to see when the lathe is being pushed to its limits. The only problem I really have with that is that the lathe's minimum speed is 500 RPM, which can cause quite a few issues when you're dealing with severely off balance pieces. This is now the third bowl I'm turning. It's a bit like a production line, as I'm working on all the outsides of the bowls first. The plan is to make 2 rough turn bowls that will be boxed up with their wetwood shavings and 2 live edge bowls. The live edge bowls I'm actually going to take down to a finished state and left to dry naturally, then later come back to those, sand them and then just remove the tenon. The first process is to drop all the blanks, which takes a fair bit amount of work as most of the time you're turning air with the gauge bouncing around. It's quite surprising as to how much this takes out on the gauge, and every now and then I'm having to retouch up the edge on the grinder. Almost every time I stop the lathe I have to tighten up the tailstock, with the wood being so soft it can soon work loose. Once I have the piece round, I can then concentrate on some form of a shape and making a tenon to fit my large jaws. With the live edge bowls being turned to a finished state, I need to take several light cuts just to try and get the best possible finish. I also had to resort to some form of scraping to try and reduce any of the tear out. This is now the last bowl. Before I mount these between centres, I usually drill a 25mm hole for the spur drive to fit in. And the reason for this is that if the spur drive loses its traction, then it will just freely spin in the hole rather than possibly slipping off the blank. So this is the same process as with the previous 3 blanks, just getting it to round before doing the final shaping and putting on the tenon. You can see here how much the shavings are piling up all over the place. I don't think there was an area that they didn't reach. Now when I take the nub down on the tenon, I just have to make sure that there's still enough wood left on there to make sure it holds in place, and the last remaining bit I then just cut off with a saw. What I do after that then is I use the live centre to mark where the centre of the tenon is. This should help me when I remount the pieces to finish them off when they're dry. A quick change from my standard jaws to the large jaws. Working on the inside of the bowls is just so much quicker to start removing all the wood, and I'm starting here with the 2 bowls that are just going to be rough turned and boxed up with their wetwood shavings. The first process is to take the rim down and remove the pith. Once I've got the rim height set, I can then just remove all the waste wood and just trying to make sure I leave as much support as possible as I work my way down the sides, trying to make them as fairly even as possible to allow for even drying. With both the bowls finished, they're both weighed, dated, then boxed in their wet wood shavings. The two live edge bowls are next, where with all my work I always mark where jaw one is going to be. The sooner I can swap over tool rests, the better. These S-shaped tool rests are just ideal for working inside bowls. Just gives you much better tool support. With the live edge bowls, because they're going to be a finished state, I'm just taking plenty of time here to make sure the sides are even and to reduce any of the tool marks that are in there. To get a nice transition from the sides to the base, I'm using a round nose scraper, just taking light cuts until I'm happy with the finished item. The last bowl is the larger one of the two, and I work on this exactly the same way as the previous one, except due to its size the walls will be slightly thicker. With all the bowls finished, you can now just see how much mess I've got to clear up. The workshop is just covered in wet wood shavings all over the place. By the time I cleared these up, there was nearly 5 sackfuls. Hello there, it's Paul here, and welcome along everyone. Something a little different for a change. Don't do very much bolt turning whatsoever. The blank for this, I'll probably show a picture up on the side here of what's left of my walnut pile, and as you'll see I've still got a fair bit left, but one of those big bits, Thursday evening I went out with my replicating saw, cut it in half first of all, crossed the grain, took about 10 minutes, and then the two halves, split them right down the centre again with a replicating saw. That took about another hour, and by the time you finish using the replicating saw for so long, your hands and your lower arms are really feeling it all. Yesterday, Saturday, is when I came out and turned these, and it was a bit of a rush. That's why everything's on time lapse. I knew that how much mess it was going to create. I've still got wood shavings now, and I mean I spent about an hour cleaning up here. Now I've gone for two different types of things here. The two that you see me box up, which were just ordinary bowls, I've literally rough turned them at around about 15-20mm thickness all the way through. I've dated them when I've done them. They're going to sit in the boxes here with the wet wood shavings for probably about a month, 6 weeks. Then I'll take them out and just leave them in the workshop to finish off drying. And I found with the last two that I did, it took about 12 weeks, and they were then ready to finish off turning. The other two, these two live edges, I've turned these to finish thickness. This one's probably around about 10mm. This one, being a lot bigger bowl, is probably about nearer 15mm wall thickness. And I mean there's very slight markings in there. With the wet wood on the end grain, you're going to get tear out. There's not a lot I can do about that. It doesn't matter what you do. Now I'm going to let these dry as they are. They're just going to sit in here in the workshop, and I've weighed them yesterday and dated them, and let's say hopefully they will distort a bit, I'm sure. I know that it will be really noticeable on the tenons, and what you'll see is that, for example here, the grain direction is that way, and you'll find that these will expand that way, and they'll stay as they are on the width that way. So it'll be interesting to see how much they move, and the idea with these will be is that what I might do is when they dry down a little bit, I might give them a coat of tung oil just so they still keep a bit of moisture in there, so they don't dry too quickly. But long term, the idea is then that I will then just true up the tenon on the bottom and stick them back on the lathe, really just so that I can sand up the inside easier and the outside. Once it's all sanded, somehow turn it around on something and finish off the bottom, and again sand that. And I might, because they're off the lathe and they are live edges, they will probably get something like an oil finish. And I've got to say, I mean, I really do like these. The good thing is when you turn things like this is that you do them yourself, and everything is sort of like personalised. And I tend to like prefer this long, deep, straight shape down the edge there, and then just a curve on the bottom. And I think a lot of that is that just I want to make the maximum amount of the wood size as I possibly can. And there's somebody I watch on YouTube, and I will give him a shout out, Wood Turning Arts, and I'll put a link down below. He puts up daily videos just about, I believe he's in LA, somewhere like that, California anyway, and he does a lot of wet turning wood, all to finish size, leaves them in his house for probably a few weeks, months or whatever, until they're down to about 8% moisture content, and then finishes them off. Rick is his name, so please do go along and watch him, because it's really interesting. And I mean, something like this, he would have gone more of an overall curve shape. The way he deals with the base, I've never seen before. He will actually keep this tenon but reduce it in height so that that becomes the foot. If you look at my picture for the wood pile that I've still got left, I've still got a fair bit of walnut there. There's anything from little 1-inch spindles right the way up to those two big pieces, and they are sort of literally that round. They are quite big. Now, because they've got all branches and everything where they had coming out of them, I really do not know how I'm going to cut those yet. My main issue is that the best I have is a replicating saw. I would love a chainsaw, but I've literally just got those two left to cut now, and I really can't justify buying a chainsaw for that. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you on the next project video.